I'm Jason Deere.
I'm Sammy G.
And we are Dice and Dragons. Please take a look at the video description below. There you will see our timestamps as well as some information as to what the video is about. So, stay tuned, it's coming up. Enjoy the show. What up, gamers? Today on Dice and Dragons, I'm wearing my chainmail. Well, some kind of chainmail. Sammy G forgot his sword.
I'm gonna die.
And we are going to the world of Dungeons and Dragons, more specifically to the Sword Coast, as we enter Forgotten Realms in the deck building game Dragonfire by Catalyst Game Labs. The game is designed by Rando Bills and Lauren Coleman. It is based on the Shadowrun Crossfire system. So Sammy G, tell us a little bit more about the game itself.
Well, look, 2 to 6 players, about 60 to 90 minutes per scenario, but I'm a little bit at a loss of words, except for saying it's kind of fun. I know it's a deck building game, but I like the cooperativeness of the deck building game where you get to help each other out to defeat some of these encounters. I think it's really cleverly done. And it's always a nice hat tip to go back to my childhood, to the same universe as Baldur's Gate and Neverwinter and, you know, all that.
No, it's definitely a well-made game, and I think we also played it with Julie for our first playthrough, and as someone that typically doesn't really like deck builders, the one thing she said after we played, she goes, "Now that I got it, that's fun, I'll play it again." So that just gives you a little bit of an idea of where we're going with the game.
Yeah.
So we're going to just do as we always do here on Dice and Dragons. We're going to grab our drinks, we're going to grab a buddy, and we're going to play Dungeons and Dragons Dragonfire.
Let's take it to the table.
You think they got good beer in the Sword Coast?
We have recycled this joke at least a dozen times by now.
That's even better. Welcome to the Sword Coast. Welcome to Forgotten Realms. We are playing Dragonfire. So, we are going to start with taking a look at the components for the game. And the whole purpose of this is just to give you a quick overview of what you're going to be getting in the box. And we'll just take a little bit of time to explain maybe how some of the components interact together. But we're going to save the meat of it for the actual gameplay explanation. And we'll start off with taking a look at the character cards. So we have 4 character cards here. As you can see, there is the Cleric, which is a devotion class. We have the Wizard, because what Dungeons and Dragons game is complete without a Wizard, which is an arcane class. We have our martial class, the Fighter, and we also have our deception class, the Rogue. And everyone hates those sneaky rogues because they're always stabbing you in the back from behind. I just don't understand it. Now, those are not the only classes that are available. There are rangers, warlocks, and other characters that you can use. There are other races as well, such as orcs, half-elves, dwarves. But for the purposes of this review, and based on what is recommended in the Quick Start Guide, we have just selected the primary human characters. So, mentioning the Quick Start Guide, you have the nice Quick Start Guide here, which will get you started playing Dragonfire. It does simplify a fair bit of the rules. For example, you won't necessarily need the Dragonfire deck. You also have the Dragonfire rulebook. And after playing through the Quick Start Guide, Sammy G and I would recommend that you actually take a look at the rulebook and use the example of play in the rulebook to really sort of clarify some things that the Quick Start Guide doesn't do well presenting. So we'll take a look at the components. You have your gold, which comes in 3 and 1 denominations. You have your exhaustion tokens, which come into play after a character has been stunned. You have your +1 and also -1 tokens that you're going to see a little bit more in effect during the campaign, or depending on any effects that might come from off the Dragonfire cards. We have our enemy tokens. Now, the enemy tokens do correspond to the different types of enemy encounters. So just like our heroes, the encounters are also come in different flavors as well. You have your deception, you have your arcane, your devotion, and your martial. Now, those tokens would show up to represent other enemies that might spawn with an encounter. You have the Dragonfire token, which denotes the first player. And you also have our handy dandy adventure environment. Now this is where you will place the player tokens. As you can see here, they're different colors set up to match the character class that you will be playing. Now, if you happen to be playing a 5 to 6 player game, or for example, you both just really like being fighters and being up in people's faces, well, you have another token that would be the second martial character class token that you can use. You also have the character class tokens. Now this does dip a little bit into the how to play, but if you are playing a 2 or 3 player game, you do need to have one of every class available. So one player will take one of these tokens to represent a secondary class, which is, in true Dungeons and Dragons spirit, because who doesn't love to multi-class when they're playing the game? We have the Dragonfire deck, which may hold something good for the heroes, but primarily danger and terror. So not a very fun deck. We have our encounter deck. And now in the encounter deck, you're going to have a couple of different types of cards. You will have, your typical encounters, your monsters. As you can see here, we've got a devotion encounter. We also have an arcane encounter. And then you will also sometimes have location encounters. And that's the reason why we've got the adventure environment here, because if a location counter comes up, a player will be sucked into that location. And we'll explain a little bit more about how that works as we get into how to play the game. Now, as you can probably see from the main camera here, we've got all these Dragonfire cards that look alike, but they're in 3 different decks. Now, why are they in 3 different decks? Is because they actually are completely different decks. So, you have, for example, your magic item cards. These cards are going to come into play as you play a campaign. They will not be in play when you are doing the quick start version of the game, or if you just decide to pop out an adventure and play quickly with your friends. You have your marketplace cards, and we'll talk about more about the marketplace cards when we go to how to play, but as you can see here, you get them for each type of class. So you've got your arcane, your devotion, deception, and of course your martial, because every fighter just has to get in the thick of it. You also have your basic cards, and as you can see, I just pulled the 3 top ones because we've kept them all organized, because your basic cards are going to be where you draw your starting equipment. So they're really all the same, as you can see. And when you look at a character card, so let's take a look at the deception card, the rogue. They're going to start with 4 basic deception cards, 1 basic martial card, 1 basic arcane, and 1 basic devotion card. Now, the other components that we have here are our little nice pointers. Now, the pointers are used to keep track of your health. So you place it on the character board, and you will adjust it when you take damage. You also use the pointers to keep track of encounter damage. So if you've done 1 devotion damage to your swarming skeletons, you would place your token here showing what still needs to be done in order to successfully beat the encounter. Now we also have our adventure cards. Now these come into play during campaign play, and we'll talk a bit more about that as we explain the differences between just picking up the game and playing and how you're going to go on an adventure if you're playing in the campaign. You have your nice campaign storybook, because in Dragonfire an ancient evils arose, and our heroes, our adventurers of the Sword Coast, are going to be striving to take it down no matter the cost. And then, what is a Dungeons and Dragons game without, of course, leveling up? I mean, heck, Blizzard has made a fortune off of getting people to level up as you play World of Warcraft. So these cards are some of the backgrounds as well as feats and other things that you can obtain as you play through a Dragonfire campaign that you would then place on your hero board as you level up. So we've now taken a good look at the components that come in the box. Now let's see how you play Dragonfire. We've started our basic setup for Dragonfire As you can see, we have our adventure environment set up, and there are 4 character tokens on it. We're just going to go through a 4-player setup because as we explain how to do combat, it's going to be a lot better with 4 characters. But for the moment, I'm just going to show you how to set up 1. So we picked the dungeon environment because we were starting with the level 1 adventure, dungeon crawl, and we would then follow the instructions that are on the card. So for the adventure setup, we would take the dungeon deck 1, which is denoted by the dungeon symbol here. You can also barely see it, but the cards are all numbered. So for example, Cursed Ground is 5 of 20. Those 20 cards make up dungeon deck 1. Now this would make up your primary encounter deck. Then you would then take dungeon deck 2, as you can see here by the double dungeon token, and that would be your secondary encounter deck. Now if you're wondering how you can tell those tokens apart, just take a look at the rule book. You've got the environments and encounters that show up here with dungeon, city, coastal, wilderness, adventurers, stars. So that just tells you what decks you're going to be using for your adventure. Now to set your character, you're going to follow what is on their cards. So your starting hand is going to be 4 cards. The cleric, the human cleric, starts with 4 gold. So I would take, sorry, not 4 gold, it is 3 gold. I would take 3 gold from the gold pile and put it with my character. I would then set up my equipment pack, which is 4 devotion cards, 1 martial card, 1 arcane, and 1 deception. You can see that I've done that here. I will then take our handy dandy pointer and set up his health, which is 8 health, which you can see right here on the card. You then shuffle up your basic deck. And you would then deal 4 cards to get your starting hand. So clearly I did an absolutely terrible job shuffling, but I start with 4 devotion cards, which actually does make a little bit of sense since it's only a 7-card deck. So I have my deck here. I will also be representing the first player, meaning I have the Dragonfire token, and the Dragonfire deck would go next to me. Now, unless the adventure says otherwise, your Dragonfire level will start at 0, meaning there are no current Dragonfire cards in play. So I'm just going to move the adventure deck, the encounter deck, sorry, just a little bit out of the way. We'll keep our primary deck here and our secondary deck here, and we'll set up the market. So for the market, you're going to draw 6 cards. And these will represent the cards that you can buy after defeating encounters. We've now set up the base part of the game. Let's just take a quick look at the encounter phase. Now for Dungeon Crawl, it says that you are going to reveal a scene equal to the number of characters for the first scene. For the second scene, because this adventure is 3 scenes, it is the number of characters plus 1. For the third scene, it's number of characters plus 2. And what the adventure says is you will reveal a character from the secondary deck based on the Dragonfire level. Since this adventure starts out at a 0 level, we are going to reveal one from the primary deck because that's what it says. You will reveal a number of encounters equal to the Dragonfire level, with the first one coming from the secondary deck and then the other one's coming from the primary deck. So in this case, I'll draw from the primary deck. Actually, sorry, I set that up incorrectly. That was the secondary deck. So this one, I noticed that because of the 2 dungeon symbols on it. So we'll draw one from the primary deck, which is the Swarming Skeletons. You would then assign this encounter to a player of a corresponding color. So as I'm playing the Devotion class, the Cleric, and this is the Devotion encounter, my Cleric would be fighting the Swarming Skeletons. I would also draw 2 tokens because it is a swarm of skeletons. So it's not just this guy, he's got 2 friends. And when you are fighting an encounter that does have tokens, you do need to defeat the tokens before you can defeat the skeleton. So the stats for the tokens are written here. So they take 1 colorless damage, so 1 of any type of damage. And if they are not defeated, they deal 1 damage to the player that is fighting them during the damage phase. So we have now just reviewed how to set up the game of Dragonfire. Let's take a look at what a round looks like as we get some other characters in here. Looking forward to smashing through this dungeon with the party. The party's gathered. We're in the dungeon. The cleric is fighting the swarm of skeletons since the first encounter was a devotion encounter. And we are now going to deal out the other 3 encounter cards that we need to deal out. What we will do is we are going to deal the first encounter to the character to the left. It does not matter if the type matches. The card that we have picked is an Etten, which is a martial class encounter, but as the deception class rogue is the first character to the left, the rogue is the one that's going to be encountering the Etten. The wizard shall encounter the giant spider, even though it is a deception class monster. And the fighter, I'll just move the adventure setup card out of the way here, is encountering the minotaur. Now, we're going to explain what a round is. Each player takes their turn in sequence and can play their cards on any encounter that is in front of them. It is very important to note that you must clear the top damage level and go down in a descending order. Any damage that you deal that is not cleared entirely is lost and reset at the beginning of the next turn. The next player's turn. So if you do not deal 4 damage of any color to this minotaur, this level will not be cleared. The cleric has drawn 4 graces and is going to play them on the swarming skeletons because he is about to be attacked during his turn. We'll play both graces first on the swarming skeletons to destroy the other 2 skeleton tokens. Then play the other devotion to damage the swarming skeletons, getting rid of the devotion damage requirement. And now there is 1 card left. So I'm going to just take a look and see what our nice cleric can do here to help out any of his allies. And unfortunately, with all the encounters that they have, he's not going to be able to do anything or clear any levels with the last remaining grace card. At this point, the best thing to do is to end playing cards. The graces now will go into a discard pile. The swarming skeletons are going to attack the cleric, dealing 1 damage. And I have 3 gold that I can spend to acquire a card. I will spend 2 of the gold, keeping 1 to acquire the javelin. Now, what is very important is when you acquire cards in Dragonfire, they go directly into your hand. As you can see here, the javelin also has an assist ability. Assist can be played during another player's turn to help them beat the opponent that they're fighting. I'll also then replenish my cards, which I may have done just a little bit out of order, but it doesn't matter because I have, as long as you have 3 or less cards, you will always replenish 2 cards into your hand. So the cleric is now once again at 4 cards, and it is now the rogue's turn. That is just an idea of the combat that we're going to do, and don't forget to always replenish a card in the marketplace. If you do not buy a card from the marketplace during your turn, you are obligated to discard a card from the marketplace and put a new card out. If, let's say, I did not buy the javelin, I may have just decided to discard the big finish. Even though it's a really good card, it's expensive. I would have discarded it and then drawn another card from the marketplace deck, and that would replace my marketplace action in terms of buying a card. We're just going to cut right here, and we're going to take a look at a little bit of what the rogue would have done in combat, just to really give you an idea of how a full round of combat will go in Dragonfire. Sammy G has joined the party, and we've just shifted around the heroes a little bit because, as I said, we want to show you how to do an assist action. It's something that wasn't really clear as we read the quick start guide, and it's a very big part of playing Dragonfire. Now the wizard is swapped positions with the rogue, and the wizard is going to be engaging the Etten in combat. Now, one thing to remember in Dragonfire is you can play your cards on any encounter in front of any player. So Sammy G, what are you going to do with that powerful wizard of yours?
So with the wizard, I'm going to help you defeat the swarming skeletons. This is not an assist, it is my turn. But I'm allowed to again play my cards to any monster or to any encounter currently out on the table. So I will put the wizard, the arcane damage, onto the swarming skeleton, thereby defeating it.
Yep, and you will play all of your cards, and then you will resolve them all at the same time.
Exactly. So I don't need to play all the cards, but we resolve the damage only at the end of the turn. I am left with 3 cards in my hand, so I can only deal 3 damage to the Etten, which I'm going to move here so you guys can see it better. And I will place 3 cards next to it. So that does 3 damage to the Etten, but we need to do 5, and here's where the assist comes into play.
Exactly. Now, since our cleric got the javelin, an assist is able to be played during another player's turn. So the cleric is now throwing a javelin to help our intrepid wizard defeat the Etten, dealing a total of 5 damage of any color, successfully clearing the first damage level on the Etten. I will then take the javelin back into my discard pile. Sammy G will take his cards back. The Etten remains in front of the wizard, and as the swarming skeleton has now been defeated, it goes to the discard pile, and the party gains gold. So as this is a 4-player game, each player gains 1 gold. And the reason why it's 1 gold, as you can see from the swarming skeletons here, that is the gold reward for defeating the skeletons. If, for example, we had defeated the Etten, it would have been 7 gold. Now, the way a combat round works is that all encounters have to be defeated. And that is when you will draw the Dragonfire card. Once every player has played, and it can be multiple times, and all encounters have been defeated, then the first player would draw the Dragonfire card. In this case, it would be the God's Displeasure, and this card would then go into effect for the next round. And then you would follow the different encounter setup, because there is now a Dragonfire level to the game, meaning that in the first adventure dungeon crawl, you would start drawing cards from the secondary deck. And that is how you play Dragonfire in terms of combat and a round. We're going to cut right here and then explain a little bit about what happens if, unfortunately, your character gets defeated, knocked out, and how location encounters work in Dragonfire. Now we've shown you how to play Dragonfire, but we realized we just weren't quite clear as to the turn order. Now the reason for that is we really wanted to show you the things that we found a little bit difficult after reading the quick start guide, but we still want to make sure you know how to play the game properly. So let's take a look at the quick start guide. I know it's a little bit ironic, but there is a nice phases of a turn order here that will really clarify how you play the game. So the first thing you're going to do is play your cards. The next thing you're going to do is deal damage, followed by take damage. There is then the replenish phase. After that, you have your market action, and then you will end your turn. Now we are fighting the stone giant. What the cleric is going to try to do is to deal enough damage to the stone giant to kill it. And if I'm not able to do that with, let's say, the 4 cards that I have in my hand, I would then take 1 damage from the stone giant. So you can see the type of damage you need to deal and the damage that your character is going to receive. In this situation where I really can't do too much damage, and let's say, for example, I have 4 cards in my hand, and just don't forget there is no maximum hand size, so you can have 4 cards and go up to 5 cards or 6 cards by buying cards from the market. But during the replenish phase, you only get to draw cards if you have 3 or fewer. You are allowed to discard a card to go down to 3 or fewer, and then you can then draw 2 more cards into your deck. Now you may wonder, why would you want to discard cards? Well, perhaps you're on scene 3 of your adventure, and you've picked up these 2 basic cards, and at that point they're just not cutting it anymore. And for those players that are familiar with deck builders, hand management and being able to get rid of cards is a big part of the game, and that's really where this discard element comes from. Now what we're going to do is we'll talk a little bit about the 2 and 3 player variants. We're going to show you what exhaustion is and how your character can be defeated and exactly what happens during a location encounter. We're in trouble. As you can see in this scenario, our fighter is fighting the stone giant and only has 1 health left. And when you're looking at the cards that are in front of them, they're not going to be able to damage the stone giant enough to defeat it. That means they're going to become stunned. Now when your player becomes stunned, you take all of your cards, you shuffle them all together. The enemy encounter does not move, it stays in front of the stunned character, and you are now not able to play until you are healed, meaning you need some help from maybe our friendly neighborhood cleric who can play a card on their own turn, such as Healing Word, and assist you to heal you and bring you back in the fight. Now, once you've been healed, you would get a exhaustion token. What that means is that there are limitations placed on your character. You are not at full strength, and you can get some clarification from that in the rulebook. It's actually quite clear. But the one thing that we really want to stress is that if you get damaged again and become stunned again while you have an exhaustion token, you then become unconscious, and you are no longer part of the party until there is at least a short rest. So you really do not want to let that happen to your character, and hopefully your teammates will be able to heal you or kill that nasty encounter in front of you to keep you in the fight. And that's how exhaustion works. Now we're going to take a quick look at the 2 to 3 player variant. We're going to take a look at the 2 to 3 player variant. In this scenario, we're going to be playing as a cleric and a fighter, meaning we do not have an arcane class character or a deception class character. Now what you do in that situation is that the characters that you are playing need to represent another class. And that's just a fun part of D&D. Who doesn't love multi-classing? So the fighter is going to take on the deception class, while the cleric is going to take on the arcane class. What you will also do is you're going to start at a weaker Dragonfire level. With a 2-player game, it would be at -2, meaning that you're going to go through 2 full rounds before any Dragonfire cards come out. In a 3-player game, it is -1. Now, your player characters also get to exchange one of their basic equipment packs for a better card. In this case, that card would be Bless, which is a card that allows you to assist other players, and it'll just make it a little bit easier to defeat encounters at the start. And in a 2-player game, each player gets to take a Bless card. In a 3-player game, only the person that is representing a dual class would get the Bless card. Now we'll just take a quick look at another thing that we wanted to mention, which are the swords. So you have these sword icons here. Now when you're playing the martial class character such as the fighter, if you play cards that have the sword icon for a total of 3 swords, an example of this is the grapple card, which has 1 sword, you will get to draw another card into your hand. This is a very powerful ability and something that you really want to take advantage of as the martial class. So let's take a look at what exactly is a location encounter, and then we'll get to our review of the game. Now the last thing we're going to explain are location encounters. In this scenario, our cleric has drawn the Cursed Ground encounter, which has drawn him into location. Now there is a surprise, meaning that you have to discard 2 cards, which is unfortunate. I have a nice 5-card hand, and I'm going to have to discard the 2 cards. Now when I'm in this location, I am able to attack the location. At the end of my turn, if I am in the location, as you can see here from the damage marker, I will take 1 damage. Now a character may move in and out of the location. However, there has to be a player in the location at the end of the turn. And in order to do damage to a location, a player also has to move into the location. So for example, let's say the deception character would like to help me out. He would then have to move into the cursed ground to be able to damage it, And let's say in this scenario, I was badly damaged. Because the deception character has moved in, I may also move out of the location at the start of my turn, thereby avoiding taking damage. Now the location does go next to the adventurer deck, or if you want, you can actually place it in front of the character that drew it because it does count as that character's encounter. And that is how you do location encounters in Dragonfire. And we're going to take you to our review of the game.
So we played a couple of missions. We now know how to play Dragonfire. What do you think of the game?
Dragonfire is a fantastic cooperative deck builder. After playing Scott Pilgrim, and we took a couple stabs at Rune Age way back in the day before we started the channel, and while those were fun, it wasn't the same as this. It's quite clear that the game was designed with Dungeons and Dragons players in mind. It has a little bit of flavor, but it's also open. This is something that if you like playing games with your friends, you can get it to the table. It's easy to understand, and people are going to want to sit down and play the campaign with you. We've played a couple of other campaign games like Descent and Imperial Assault, and as much as I love those games, I feel like this game's going to be just a little bit easier to get out there and in front of some people compared to those games, just due to setup time even.
No, that's it. So setup time's not so bad. The cleanup time, again, not so bad. There is quite a lot of components on here. Speaking of components, production value, I love the treasure deck. They actually put foiled backs on there so the treasure sparkles.
I really like that as well.
That's super. To knock it a little bit, I'm not crazy about the stickers. To kind of peel them on, peel them off, you're going to start damaging it. I didn't like that very much. I think they could have done something else to try to build your characters, and as you're powering up and you're leveling up, they could have done something else to make cleanup a little bit easier off of the cards. And the other knock I'll give it, only because I'm really nitpicky, they printed it on the same card backs for every type. So the treasure deck's on the same card back as the as your basic deck, as your market deck, or it's obviously they were trying to save money on this.
Yeah.
I don't like that much.
No, and I agree with you on that. And also, when you try to resort the cards, the information on the cards is really small and tiny at the bottom. And since even expansion cards also have like the same backs that you have on the main cards, it's difficult to really resort everything, especially if you want to play one big long campaign. So that is one negative on it. The other thing I do want to knock is the quick start guide, because it is definitely good at getting you started playing at the table, but when it comes to a lot of clarification and rules, it's just not there. And there's one thing that should have definitely been in the quick start guide, and we don't usually do this, but I am taking out the rule book just because of how much I thought it was missing, which is this. The page that actually takes you through how to play. We started playing with the quick start guide, and just the way that you resolve characters' turns and use assist really wasn't clear. So read that page. It's going to do you guys wonders, especially if you have any questions after watching our review and the how to play.
So we're going to go right into the marks, and honestly, I go back to the introduction where I said it's just a fun game. It plays relatively quickly. It certainly does not feel like 60 to 90 minutes. Some games you kind of go into the middle there. You're getting towards the end game, and it feels long. You're tired. This one, it breezes by really quickly. Even though you look at the time, it's like, oh my god, like an hour and a half has gone by. You don't feel that at all. And really, in terms of a deck building game, for what it presents, for the price point, which is not that bad for what it offers, I give it a really solid 9 on 10.
Yeah, I also have to give the game a 9 on 10. I mean, as we were struggling just a little bit learning the rules because we started out with the quick start guide, we were still having fun. We were playing it wrong, and it was still fun. It was challenging. It was actually so difficult that we're like, we got to be doing something wrong here. And then after we got into the groove, it was even more fun. So we spent a good time diving in, just starting off, and then after playing some campaign missions, we were just having a really good time. And I think it's a game that you're actually going to be seeing here again on the channel, or probably do a review maybe of the campaign and the expansions as well.
Maybe a couple of playthroughs if you guys request it. Of course, you could comment if you want to see that. But
maybe if we get the Cyberbot on there, he can narrate the campaign for us.
Maybe another production with him. Who knows? We'll see. So from us at Dice and Dragons, thank you guys very much for watching. If you can find Dragonfire, absolutely go pick it up. It is a wonderful game to add to your collection. And of course, grab your drink, grab your buddy, and keep playing games.
Keep playing games.
Cheers, guys.
So the chainmail work this time?
Well, we didn't die horribly.
Oh, you know what? this is like the first time in like a while that we haven't been murdered by our game.
So now that you brought it up, we're going to die every single time. Thank you. Even in the tutorial mode, which, by the way, we skimmed by just by like the skin in our teeth. Well, after we played it wrong and did actually die. But anyways, we won't say that. Hey, thanks very much for watching, guys. If you like what you saw, as always, please comment. Please subscribe. Won't cost you any gold, XP, willpower, nothing. It doesn't cost you anything.
Yes, and if you'd like to follow us to get some more information about when there'll be some new videos and what our upcoming content might be, please follow us on Twitter at dice_and_dragons. You can find us on Facebook at Dice and Dragons Games. We like to interact with our fans, so please head on over and comment. And then you can see some pictures as to maybe what game's coming up at Dice and Dragons on Instagram. And if that's a little bit complicated, don't worry, we included all that information down below in the video description.
So you might see about now some other links to our other content. It's again free for you guys. We love what we do. And as always, grab a drink, grab your buddy, keep playing games.
Keep playing games.